My name is Adrian Sterling, and at 38, I've mastered the art of control. A venture capitalist worth $500 million, I'd built an empire by never letting emotions cloud judgment. Divorce from a woman who married my money rather than me. A daughter I'm fighting for custody of. A reputation for ruthlessness that precedes me into boardrooms. I don't date. Dating requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is weakness. Then Sophie Chen walked into that charity gala. She wasn't the type who usually caught my attention, no diamond-encrusted networking, no calculated smile designed to impress. She stood near the silent auction, studying a painting with genuine interest, completely oblivious to the power players circling. When I asked what she saw in the artwork, she didn't give the expected answer about investment value or social positioning. Hope, she said simply. The artist painted this during their darkest period. But instead of depicting despair, they chose to paint light breaking through clouds. That's not optimism. That's defiance. I was intrigued. We talked for hours, ignoring business obligations and social hierarchies. Sophie was a high school art teacher, brilliant and funny, with eyes that held both kindness and sadness. When she laughed, genuine, unguarded laughter, I felt something crack inside my carefully constructed armor. Have dinner with me, I said, already knowing she'd say no. Women like Sophie didn't date men like me. Shockingly, she agreed. The restaurant was exclusive, the kind of place where reservations required connections I had. As we ordered, I noticed Sophie studying the menu with intense focus, not deciding what to eat, but calculating something. When the waiter approached with water and bread, she ordered the soup. Nothing else. That's it? I asked, bewildered. It's delicious, she said, but something flickered across her face, embarrassment, maybe, or shame. Dinner proceeded pleasantly enough. We talked about art, about my daughter Emma, about the dreams Sophie had abandoned when her parents needed financial help. But the elephant in the room was the bill. When the waiter placed it down, Sophie's hand trembled as she reached for her purse. I can't pay for dinner, she said quietly, meeting my eyes. I have about $60 in my account, and this meal is 3 times that. I should have suggested somewhere else, but I wanted to spend time with you, and I wasn't thinking clearly, and now I'm humiliated and you're probably going to think I came here expecting you to pay, which is manipulative, Anne. Sophie. I covered her hand. Stop. I'm sorry. I should have been honest from the beginning. You were honest. Right now. That's what matters. I picked up the bill, unconcerned. This isn't about the money. But it is, though. It's always about the money, isn't it? You have it, I don't. That dynamic means this will never be equal. You'll always have power, and I'll always be grateful, and eventually you'll resent me for needing you. I leaned across the table and kissed her. Brief, gentle, shutting down her spiral with action instead of words. Come with me, I said. Not tonight. I mean tomorrow. I want to show you something. The next day, I took her to my beach house in Malibu, not to seduce her, though the temptation was overwhelming, but to show her something deeper. In my office, I opened a drawer containing my divorce papers, custody agreements, and financial records from my marriage. My ex-wife, I said, handing her the documents, married me for this. Not for me, for the lifestyle, the security, the status. When she got bored, she cheated. When I wouldn't give her everything in the divorce, she fought me for Emma. She weaponized my money against me. Sophie read carefully. This is awful, Adrian. I'm sorry. The point is, I don't care about money with you. I'm attracted to you because you're brilliant and kind and you look at the world like it still has beauty worth painting. Not because of what you can buy or how you can impress people. I took her hands. So if you're worried about the dinner bill creating some power dynamic, don't. I'd rather be with someone who can't pay than someone who uses money as currency for affection. She cried, not sad tears, but something deeper. Relief, maybe. Or the breaking down of walls she'd built to protect herself. I like you, she whispered. And I'm terrified of liking you. Why? because everything about this feels too good to be true. And in my experience, things that seem perfect usually are. We spent the weekend together, talking, walking the beach, building something neither of us could name. But as Monday approached and reality intruded, I felt her pulling back, subtle at first, then obvious. "I can't keep doing this," she said Sunday evening. "Why?" "Because I'm a teacher making $45,000 a year. I'm paying off my parents' medical bills, helping my sister with her kids. I have nothing, Adrian. And you're waiting for me to break under the weight of that, or worse, for me to start wanting your money. To become the kind of woman you hate. That won't happen. You don't know that. You think you do, but you don't know what wanting things does to people. What desperation makes us capable of." Before I could respond, my phone rang. My ex-wife's lawyer. Emma had been hospitalized, acute appendicitis. I needed to get to the hospital immediately. I looked at Sophie. "Come with me?" She should have said no. Should have used it as an exit. Instead, she followed me to the hospital, sat with me through surgery, held my hand when I was too terrified to think straight. That was the moment I knew I was falling in love with her. But late that night, while Emma slept, I discovered Sophie's hospital bracelet in the trash, dated from 3 years ago. Psychiatric hold. 54 days. When I asked her about it, she said simply, "I tried to kill myself. My parents' debts, my sister's struggles, my own failures, it all became too much. I took a bottle of pills and woke up in a hospital." She paused. "I'm better now. Therapy, medication, the whole journey. But that's my secret, Adrian. That's the thing I've been terrified of telling you." I held her, feeling the magnitude of what she was trusting me with. "Thank you for telling me." What I didn't know was that Sophie was hiding something far more dangerous than mental health struggles. And that revelation would destroy everything I thought I understood about her. Sophie moved into my penthouse. We created a rhythm: mornings where she'd teach and I'd work, evenings where we'd cook together and talk about futures that felt increasingly real. Emma adored her, saw her as the mother figure my ex had never been. Everything seemed perfect. But perfection is a lie we tell ourselves before everything shatters. The first sign was financial. My accountant flagged unusual activity, money leaving accounts I'd given Sophie access to for household expenses. Small amounts at first, never enough to raise red flags individually, but cumulatively significant. "Sophie," I said, trying to keep accusation from my voice, "where's this $20,000? She paled. "What do you mean?" "Money transferred from the household account to an account I can't trace. Multiple transfers over 2 months. Adrian, I can explain." "Then explain." She broke down, admitting the truth I'd begun to suspect: she hadn't overcome her financial struggles. They owned her. She'd been secretly paying debts, helping her sister who was in an abusive relationship, covering costs of her ongoing therapy. And when those debts had spiraled, when her sister's situation became dire, she'd rationalized taking money from me. "I was going to pay it back," she said, tears streaming. "I have a plan, I just needed time? Money? Permission to lie to me?" The betrayal was sharp and cold. "You said you were afraid I'd resent you for needing me. So instead of trusting me, you stole from me. That's worse, Sophie. That's criminal. I know. I know it was wrong. But if I'd asked, you would have said yes, and I would have felt like I was using you, like I was becoming the kind of woman you despise. You became exactly that by lying. By making choices for both of us." I was shouting now, years of controlled emotion erupting. "My ex-wife did this. Spent money without permission, lied about where it went, justified it as needed. And I swore I'd never be in a relationship like that again. Adrian, please. I need you to leave." The words hung there, terrible and irrevocable. Sophie looked destroyed, but I was too angry to care. I'd let someone in, dropped my carefully constructed walls, and been repaid with betrayal. Of course. That's what people did. She left that night, taking only her clothes and personal items. But she'd left something else, evidence of her larger deception. 2 days later, Detective Maria Santos showed up at my office with questions. My ex-wife Veronica had filed a complaint alleging that Sophie Chen had systematically stolen from her as well. Had manipulated her into providing loans for family emergencies that never existed. Had created a paper trail suggesting I was complicit in financial fraud. Ms. Chen has a history of financial manipulation, Detective Santos said, sliding a file across my desk. Worked at an art gallery 3 years ago where she was fired for allegedly stealing from the register. She admitted to the theft, paid restitution, but refused to press charges to avoid complicating her life. My stomach dropped. I didn't know. I'm sure you didn't. Manipulation is her skill set. The question is, are you willing to testify that she took money from you without permission? I thought of Sophie's vulnerability, her honesty about her suicide attempt, the way she'd looked at me like I was worth staying alive for. And I thought of my daughter, who Sophie had been bonding with. Who might be at risk if Sophie was as calculating as the evidence suggested. Yes, I said. I'll testify. But that night, I called her. Needed to hear her side before committing to this legal warfare. Did you steal from Veronica? I asked without preamble. Yes. Her voice was hollow. But not the way she's claiming. My sister was being abused, Adrian. Her husband was controlling every penny, monitoring where she went. She needed money to escape, and I didn't have any. But Veronica had offered to help years ago, so I asked. She said she would, then used it as leverage to control me. To make me feel like I owed her. When I tried to walk away from the situation, she threatened to tell you I'd stolen from her if I didn't continue paying her back with information about your business. You're lying. You're making excuses. I'm telling you the truth. Veronica is using both of us. She wants you to hate me so you'll lower your guard financially with her in custody negotiations over Emma. How convenient. A perfectly constructed counter-narrative. Adrian, you have to trust me. Trust? That's rich coming from you. I hung up, fury and doubt consuming rational thought. The next morning, Detective Santos returned with new information. They'd found Sophie's sister, confirmed the abuse, confirmed Veronica's exploitation. But Sophie, desperate and scared, had done something catastrophic. She'd accessed Veronica's financial records without permission to gather evidence of the blackmail. Not hacking, but using a password Veronica had carelessly left visible. Unauthorized access to financial records. Federal crime. I received a call from Sophie's public defender. She was being charged with computer fraud, theft, and conspiracy. And the state was pressing hard because Veronica, influential and wealthy, wanted maximum damage. The trial began 6 weeks later. Sophie, looking hollow and defeated, took the stand. She testified about her struggles, her family situation, Veronica's manipulation. It was honest and heartbreaking. Then Veronica testified, and she was magnificent. Tearful about being victimized, concerned about my safety being compromised by a predatory woman. She painted Sophie as someone who deliberately targeted me for access to funds. She learned about Adrian's wealth through Emma, Veronica said, voice breaking perfectly. Insinuated herself into his life, made him think she was vulnerable so he'd lower his defenses. It's textbook predatory behavior. When my turn came to testify, I had to be honest, Sophie had stolen from me. I couldn't claim otherwise. But the prosecution twisted my words, used them to corroborate Veronica's narrative. Sophie was convicted on 2 counts. 12 months in federal prison, restitution payments, 5 years probation. As the gavel came down, she looked at me across the courtroom. Not with anger or accusation, but with understanding, the look of someone who'd expected betrayal and received it anyway. I looked away. 6 months into Sophie's sentence, Emma asked me why she wasn't visiting anymore. I miss her, my daughter said simply. She was nice. Why did she go away? She did something wrong. Did she hurt you? I wanted to lie, to paint Sophie as the villain. But Emma deserved honesty. She made choices that hurt me, yes. But I think I also made choices that hurt her. That conversation haunted me. I started reviewing everything: case files, trial transcripts, evidence reports. And slowly, horrifyingly, I began to understand what I'd missed. Sophie's sister, once she felt safe, had contacted me. "Adrian, I need you to know what really happened. Veronica found me through a PI she hired. She promised to help my situation if I would confirm her narrative about Sophie. Then she used my vulnerability to pressure both Sophie and me into cooperation." The pieces rearranged themselves. Veronica hadn't been a victim, she'd been a calculated strategist playing a long game. She'd wanted to separate me from Sophie, weaken my position in the custody battle, and ultimately regain control. And I'd helped her. By listening to convenient narratives. By choosing the safer story over the complex truth. I hired a private investigator and learned that Veronica had documented her own threats to Sophie, recorded conversations where she explicitly blackmailed her. The evidence that could exonerate Sophie had existed all along. But I'd been too hurt to look for it. With fresh evidence, I went to Sophie's public defender, a young man named James Park who'd been fighting an uphill battle. "I can help. I can testify that Veronica manipulated me, played us against each other. I can corroborate everything Sophie said." "Why now?" James asked, studying me with something like contempt. "You testified against her. You sealed her fate. Because I was wrong. And she's serving time for crimes she didn't commit while committing one she did. I won't make it right, but I can try." The appeal took 2 months. New hearing, new testimony. I sat in that courtroom and admitted my failure, how Veronica had exploited my vulnerabilities, how I'd chosen pride over truth, how I'd abandoned Sophie when she needed me most. "I love her," I said simply. "And I failed her when it mattered." The judge reviewed the new evidence. Veronica's recorded threats. Her documented blackmail. The corroborating testimony from Sophie's sister. By the end of the hearing, the conviction was overturned. Sophie was released pending a new trial that never happened. The prosecution, faced with Veronica's own criminal liability, offered a deal: drop all charges against Sophie in exchange for her testimony against Veronica for fraud and blackmail. Sophie agreed. Veronica spent the time Sophie had spent in prison under house arrest, awaiting trial on federal charges. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. But freedom didn't mean reconciliation. When I went to pick Sophie up from the release center, she refused to see me. "Tell Mr. Sterling I said thank you," she said through a guard. "For finally doing the right thing. But some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt." I respected that. Deserved that. But I couldn't accept it. I showed up at her sister's apartment, where Sophie was staying. She opened the door, saw me, and tried to close it. I caught it with my hand. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," I said, speaking quickly before she could shut me out completely. "I know I chose the comfortable lie over the complicated truth. I made you pay for my inability to trust, my fear of being hurt again. But Sophie, I need you to know, you were never the threat. You were always the person showing me what love could be if I was brave enough to let it in. And I was a coward. You had every right to feel betrayed when I stole from you. Yes. But you didn't deserve to go to prison for it. You deserved someone who loved you enough to dig deeper, to question the narrative that made him the victim." I stepped closer. "I can't take back what happened. But I can spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that I see you, the real you, flaws and all, and I choose you anyway." "Adrian. Emma's asking about you. She's confused and sad and doesn't understand why you're gone." "I'm confused and sad too. And I'm asking, not demanding, if there's any possibility we could try again." Slowly, honestly, with no expectations except complete transparency. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I went to prison for 12 months. I lost my job, my reputation. Do you understand what that cost me?" "No."
But I want to. If you'll let me. It took time.
Months of therapy, both individual and couples, where I learned the extent of damage my distrust had caused. Sophie had nightmares about prison, struggled with the loss of her career, fought persistent depression about the years stolen from her life. But slowly, carefully, we rebuilt. I rehired her as an art director for a nonprofit I started, supporting artists and people recovering from trauma. Not because she needed my help, but because she was brilliant and the work needed her. She earned legitimate income, built her confidence back, proved to herself she could succeed without anyone's charity. We actually dated, without the pressure of living together or combining finances. We learned each other without presumption, built trust through consistency rather than intensity. Emma, slowly, understood what had happened.
Sophie made a mistake, I explained. And I made a bigger one by not believing in her when it mattered. But we're both trying to be better people now.
At a school event where Emma was performing, Sophie attended, not as my girlfriend, but as a friend she'd missed. When Emma saw her in the audience, the joy on my daughter's face was answer enough to whether this could work. A year after Sophie's release, I took her back to that beach house. Not to seduce her or to apologize again, but to ask something important. "I can't pay for dinner," I said, echoing her words from years ago but with different weight.
"Not because I lack money, but because I'm asking you to take a chance on someone who failed you.
To marry me, not despite what happened, but because we survived it. Because we chose each other even when choosing was hard."
I offered a ring, not elaborate or ostentatious, but honest. Simple gold, like the woman wearing it. Sophie cried.
"I'm still broken, Adrian. I still struggle with trust."
"So do I.
But we're broken together, and that's stronger than whole apart." She said yes. Our wedding was small. Emma as my best man, Sophie's sister as maid of honor, James Park and Detective Santos as witnesses to the journey that had brought us here.
At the reception, Emma gave a toast.
"I used to have 2 people who loved me," she said, 8 years old and wiser than she should be.
"Now I have 2 people who love each other in me.
And that's the best kind of family, not perfect, but real." That night, Sophie and I stood on the beach watching waves crash against rocks, force and softness creating something neither could achieve alone.
"Do you regret?" she asked. "Any of it?"
I thought about the prison time, the trial, the year of separation.
Thought about how differently things could have gone if I'd made different choices. "No," I said honestly. "I regret the pain I caused you.
But I don't regret the life it led us to. Because you matter more to me than any amount of money or power or control. You matter as you are, flawed, struggling, beautiful in your complexity." That's very poetic for a venture capitalist.
"You made me poetic."
I pulled her close.
"You made me human."
2 years later, Sophie published a memoir about her experiences, her mental health crisis, her family struggles, her false conviction, and ultimately, her redemption. It became a bestseller, and she started speaking at universities and prisons, helping others navigate their own darkness. I watched her transform from the woman who couldn't pay for dinner into someone who could fund her own dreams. And though I offered financial support, she declined, not out of pride, but out of the knowledge that her strength came from her own efforts. We had another daughter, Maya, who had Sophie's artistic talent and my stubborn determination. Emma became a therapist, helping people navigate relationship trauma, inspired by watching her father and stepmother rebuild trust from ashes. On our 5th anniversary, we returned to that restaurant. The same table, the same waiter who remembered us and smiled knowingly. This time, when the bill came, Sophie reached for it. "My turn," she said.
"I can pay for dinner now."
I covered her hand.
"Let me." "Not because you can't, but because I want to. Because taking care of the people we love isn't weakness, it's what makes life meaningful."
She agreed, and we laughed, the kind of laughter that comes from surviving something neither of us thought they could survive. If someone had told me, Sophie said, squeezing my hand across the table, that I'd go to prison, lose my reputation, and somehow end up happier than I'd ever been, I wouldn't have believed them.
What changed?
You did. When you finally chose to see me, really see me, without judgment or expectation.
You taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing someone despite their brokenness, and letting them choose you right back.
I kissed her hand. I can't pay for dinner, she'd admitted years ago. But that confession had been the beginning of everything. Not because I had the money to fix her problems, but because she had the courage to admit she needed help. And I had the wisdom eventually to give it in the form of love rather than judgment. Looking at my wife across that candlelit table, at the life we'd built from heartbreak and betrayal and ultimate forgiveness, I understood something fundamental.
The most valuable currency isn't money. It's showing up for someone when showing up is hard. It's believing in them when they've given you every reason not to.
It's saying, I can't pay for dinner, and having someone respond not with pity or leverage, but with a simple, honest, neither of us has to pay for anything alone anymore. That was wealth beyond measure.